Well, for more on this now, we're joined by Hussein Artekin. He's an international security expert. So Hussein, then, why was this move by the Turkish Parliament so significant?
This is one of a whole integrated approach in Turkey's actions and attitude on the ongoing Israeli genocide on Gaza. This is more like a condemnation. This is more like a worldwide call to the countries which are against this ongoing genocide and to take some concrete steps to stop it from further brutality. But this is not just an isolated step of Turkey. Turkey has long argued for a two-state solution for the Israeli-Palestine disputes. But over the past year, with these increasing genocidal actions of Israel, Turkey is taking further steps to do something against this genocide. On the one hand, Turkey's parliament, as we see today, continuously condemned the Israeli acts of aggression and acts of genocide and called for some concrete steps from the world organizations and countries. But this is just a diplomatic call. But apart from that, Turkey is also putting some pressure on Israel, from barring the Israeli ships from Turkish ports to denying Turkish airspace on certain routes of Israeli airplanes, like we saw last November, for example, when the Israeli president tried to go to Azerbaijan for an international meeting. I'm talking about Herzog. And he couldn't do that because Turkey closed the airspace. So these are some gradual steps for Turkey to make things harder for Israel on the diplomatic ground and on the economic grounds. So Turkey has these two parallel routes to help Palestinians and to prevent Israeli genocide. One is the economic sanctions, economic steps, cutting off the bilateral trade ties. For example, barring the Israeli ships and airplanes from Turkish sea space and airspace. But on the other hand, there is this ongoing Turkish calls for the international diplomatic organizations and countries to coordinate and to make things harder for Israel to continue with this genocide.
Now, you mentioned, Turkey's calls for the suspension of Israel from, international institutions, but how much pressure could that put on Israel itself, these calls coming from Turkey?
This is a lot of pressure from Turkey's side. But as for Israel, Turkey is just one of many countries in the world. And some countries, they have more leverage in the international arena. For example, the United States, it is pretty much #1 sponsor of this genocide, and diplomatically and also militarily. To speak frankly, Israel doesn't have this many ammunition. They don't have such a technological scale to bomb Gaza continuously over months. They would be out of ammo, they would be out of weapons by now, they would be out of intelligence by now. But with American support, this can be possible. And also with American diplomatic support, Israel can find a shelter to keep itself safe from international pressure. So any steps to be taken by countries like Turkey or by other UN members, for sure they will be vetoed by the United States as one of the UN Security Council permanent members and as the most able country, not only in the UN Security Council but in the global scale. So the United States is helping Israel to continue with this genocide. But on the other hand, the other countries, they cannot just sit back and wait and watch this ongoing genocide. So countries like Turkey, countries like South Africa, like Brazil, like Qatar, and a number of other countries, they are trying to do something about this. But of course, they do not want to escalate the military situation, and they are using diplomatic and economic assets. They are using diplomatic and economic channels to undermine Israel's efforts for this genocide. But the counterbalance is heavier in many instances. In this case, the United States, as you just reported a few minutes ago, they are not allowing the Palestinian delegation to be present at the UN General Assembly this time. And they have multiple measures to prevent Palestine from barring them from an equal representation in the global scale in international organizations. But Turkey is doing, I think, together with some other countries like Qatar, Brazil, South Africa, and many others, they are trying to balance the United States' unilateral support for Israel's genocidal actions. And I wish I could have some more optimistic views, but that's not very, very possible as we see daily slaughters of Palestinians. But still, it's not like nothing is happening. And probably in this upcoming UN session, there will be more and more countries to recognize the statehood of Palestine. And these countries might be France, they might be United Kingdom, Canada might join them, a number of other countries might join them. And even for now, 147 nations all around the world recognize the Palestinian statehood, and the number will go up. And with this increasing number of countries taking some positive steps, perhaps in limited manners, perhaps just economic and diplomatic measures, but still, this diplomatic tide is changing in favor of Palestine, and Israel's tactical successes perhaps will not help it forever.
Hussein Araltekin, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you for joining us on the programme.
My pleasure.